Alright guys, so today we're going to practice some persuasive writing for your assignment for this class, but also to help you with other assignments that you have when this class is over. Because we do persuasive writing all the time. So when I say persuasive writing is a type of writing that we use to make someone agree with our opinion. And we use this all the time in school and in daily life. So we want someone to think that we have a good idea and agree with our opinion. So in business track, for business majors, right, you use persuasive writing to explain a decision to a boss, to team members, to investors, really to anyone that you work with in business, or to convince them that you have a good idea for a decision you want to make. In tourism, we do similar things as well, right? You might explain an important policy to a guest, a client, to people you work with, to a boss, or when you're doing advertising, to convince clients that a place or activity is fun, interesting, and that they should go visit. All of this is persuasive writing. And we also do this in school, all the time in school. So you do persuasive writing on tests, short answers, essays, different assignments. You will have essays are a very common assignment that you will do both at SWU and in other schools. And if you go to graduate school, research papers might also have persuasive writing. And so the structure will happen in all of your paragraphs. So a paragraph is a group of text about one idea or topic. And we will look at some examples. But remember that the reason we use paragraphs, the reason we divide our work into paragraphs, is to make our writing easier to read and understand. And that's the most important thing when you write. Clear organization is the most important thing. It's more important than grammar, than spelling, and well, I'm gonna show you why. So here I wrote a document, and even if the grammar is perfect, even if all of the spelling is perfect, the problem is that it's still very hard to read. And when people see something like this big, large chunk of text, they don't want to read it, or they have to struggle to read it, and they are not as interested in what you want to, in what you will say. So compare this big, large chunk of text broken down into paragraphs. Here, each idea is separated into its own separate chunk of text, and this is something that is much easier to read when you write essays, when you write emails. The person who reads your paper is going to understand you much better and be more likely to agree with what you will say. So now that we looked at some paragraphs, let's look at what the structure of a persuasive paragraph needs to have. And a persuasive paragraph needs to have three things that you remember from our earlier classes. The first one, remember, is a claim, which is one sentence that says what you want your reader to believe and why. The second thing you have is some kind of evidence or example, some kind of evidence that proves that what you say is true. And then the third is reasoning, and this is the most important part. You take that evidence and you explain it in your own words, and then you use that evidence to convince your reader. And if you do this, you will be very persuasive when you write. So the first mistake that people make when they want to do persuasive writing or any other kind of writing is they just sit down and start writing, which is not what we want to do. The first thing that we need to do is we need to outline. And an outline is a plan for your paper structure. It's very important to plan everything out before you write. So make sure you always do that. Now, the reason why is because outlines save time. If you need to write a long paper, planning what you will say instead of making it up as you go will save you a lot of time and headache. And also, it will make your paper better. It will make your paper more convincing, and it will help you get better grades in school. So let's say I want to write a letter to the dean, to persuade or convince the dean that classes should start at 9 in the morning. Well, so the first thing I need to do is I need to make that outline, right? I need to outline all of my paragraphs. If I am going to write an essay, which we will talk about next time, I will have 4 paragraphs. I will have an introduction, I will have 2 body paragraphs, just like you will in your assignment, and then I will have a conclusion. There are different kinds of writing, but this is what we will do in our class today. So, right now, I am going to write my first body paragraph, and I need to remember that I need 3 things in a persuasive paragraph, and I will do those here in a with a capital letter, just like this. So the 3 things I need, right? I need a claim, then I need to get some kind of evidence, and then I need to share my reasoning and convince the dean to change the class time. And so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so when I do outlines like that, they will always have this kind of structure. We have that Roman numeral for the type of paragraph. So in a persuasive writing like you will do, that's intro, body, or conclusion. And then you have the next piece that you use of your paragraph with your capital letters. Then when I start filling in the details, I do another little space inside with a lowercase letter that has the idea that I will write or the sentence that I will write. And I do that before making a full paragraph. When I start a persuasive paragraph, I need to start with a claim. And the claim is one clear sentence that says the idea that I want my reader to believe. And you guys did this with your first personal statement that you did. So a flight attendant is the perfect career for me. It could be using tourism. You should visit Olympic National Park. And with my paper, classes should start at 9 a.m. This is what I want my reader to believe, and that's what I'll start with. But I also need to say why. And why. So that word that we always use every day in class, because. So we have our clear sentence, and then we add because to make that a complex sentence, right? So a flight attendant is the perfect career for me because I absolutely love helping people. You should visit Olympic National Park because it has the most beautiful natural beaches in America, where classes should start at 9 a.m. because students will get better grades. And this last part here, this reason, is what each of my paragraphs will be about. If I have another reason, I will move to a new paragraph. But when I start this way, my reader clearly knows what I want them to believe and the reason that I'm going to talk about. So, going back to my outline, I go to where I want to write my claim, and I go and I say what I want to write, the reason, the topic that I'm going to use. So my first reason why classes should start at 9 a.m. is because students will be healthier. So when I do my outline, I can just say the idea just like this, or I can say the full sentence that I want to use in my paper, which is classes at SWU should start at 9 a.m. because students will be healthier. Boom. There I have my claim. So now that I have a claim, I have said what I want the dean to believe and why. Now I need some kind of evidence or an example that proves that students will be healthier, right? So you need to give some evidence that proves that your idea, decision, etc. is a good one, right? It's a good thing. And so I need to convince the dean that students will be healthier if classes start at 9 a.m. So usually this evidence comes from research. Sometimes examples from your own experience are okay. It depends on what you're writing about. But for this assignment, you need to have some kind of outside research. And that's true many times when you are doing persuasive writing. So when I go and I get some research, I always need to give the author, the person who got that research, credit for their words, credit for their ideas and credit for their research that they did. So let's look at two ways that we do that, right? So if I have a short quote from another author, actually, let's stop there. So I did some research and I found a source from the National Public Radio in the United States. I found an article that talks about sleep for young adults, for teens and young adults. And so I read this article and I found some important information that I want to use to convince the dean to start classes at 9 a.m. So now I need to use this evidence in a way that credits the author for what they said. So if I am going to use a short quote from my author, like at most 2 sentences, we don't want to have a really long piece of evidence because then they can just read the article themselves. I want to have a short quote, 1 or 2 sentences. If I'm going to use that, I need to type their exact words inside quotation marks. And I can use some key language according to the author or the author says or said. So using an exact quote from Martin Luther King, I have a dream speech. I have a dream that my 4 little children will live in a nation where they are judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. These are Martin Luther King's exact words typed here in these quotation marks. And it's very important to have these. But now that's not enough. Now I need to always include a citation for his words. So with an author, I found the author's name and the year published. King, 1963, for this example. But if I want to use a longer text, or if I want to take that quote there and make it even shorter, this is what I do. I will restate the author's own idea in my own words, but I also will include a citation. And I use this key language according to or author says or said. So I can say Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of a world where people are judged by who they are on the inside, not what they look on the outside. And those are my words. Those are not Martin Luther King's words. Those are my words about his idea. And I include a citation because that idea came from him. And again, author's name and year published. Okay, so going back to my example, I read this article and I found some cool information that I think will convince the dean to start classes later. So what I learned when I read the article was that teens' biological bedtime is more like midnight. That if they go to sleep at 10 p.m., it doesn't work. They just lay in bed and they don't fall asleep. So this means that teens need to sleep later in the morning. To ask a teen to be up and alert at 7:30 in the morning is like asking a full adult to be active and alert at 5:30 in the morning. So I want to use this quote in my paper. How am I going to do that? It's very important, right? Never to just copy and paste into a paper. We never want to do that because then we can risk plagiarism and stealing an author's ideas. It's always very important to avoid plagiarism, to type what they say in your own, by yourself. So, but because this piece of information here is a long piece of text, I'm not going to use one quote to put this in my paper. That's just too much. Instead, I'm going to paraphrase what the author says and restate it in my own words. Going back to my outline, I have done just that. I use my key language according to and the study where the information came from, which is a study by the University of Washington. And I rephrased these ideas in my own words. I said, young adults, natural bedtime is at about midnight, and then that last part, I rephrased it. And they need at least 8 hours of sleep to be fully awake. So I didn't use the author's exact words, but I took the author's words and I said them in my own way to the dean a little bit more simply. But the next thing I need is I need to give the author that credit for their study. So remember, I have my article here, and I look for the author's name and the year published. And here I see the author, Patty Namond. So there's the author's last name. And then I have 2018, the year published. And so I go to my outline. And in my outline, I'll include the citation right here with that. Namond, 2018. And that's ready to go into my paper in just a moment. So I've got my claim where I told my reader what I want them to believe and why. I got some really good evidence to show why I am right. And now I need to get to the most important part, where I convince the reader to believe me and to believe what I said in the beginning of the paragraph. So to do that, I need to take that evidence and I need to re-explain it in my own words. And so the key language that I can use to kick that off is, in other words. And then after that, I will tell my reader why that evidence proves that my idea or decision is good. And one really effective language form to do that is if-then. If we start classes at 9 a.m., then students will get to class on time. Whatever it is, using this cause or effect can really help explain and convince why you're right. And when I'm done, I will end my paragraph. Therefore or so, and then the idea that I want them to believe. Okay, and so going back to my outline, I have done just that. I took my piece of evidence and I re-explained it simply in my own words. In other words, students need to wake up after 8 a.m. to get enough sleep. So that's what I want my reader to understand about my evidence. And then I now convince them. If we start classes at 8:30, then students will have to wake up too early to get to class on time. So now I need to end my paragraph. And I'm going to use that keyword, therefore. Classes should start at 9 a.m. to make sure students get enough sleep and can come to class on time. Done. And there I now have my first body paragraph all planned out and ready to go. Now I've used my outline, just like this, to type my full paragraph. I have my claim, classes should start at 9 a.m. because students will be healthier, and I have my evidence, right? According to a study by the University of Washington, young adults' natural bedtime is at about midnight, and they need at least 8 hours of sleep to be fully awake. And there I have my citation. Then now I get to my reasoning. In other words, students need to wake up after 8 a.m. to get enough sleep. If we can start classes at 8, then students will have to wake up too early to get to class on time. Therefore, classes should start at 9 a.m. to make sure students get enough sleep and come to class on time. Now, one thing I just noticed is that because my topic sentence talks about health, right? A really good way to make sure you really make your paragraphs awesome is to make sure you use that word from your first part at the end. So I talk about health here. I need to add that here to my paragraph. So I'm going to say that students, to make sure students get enough sleep to be healthy and come to class on time. There we go. Now I have that last little bit that really puts that nice polished finish on my final paragraph. So again, it doesn't matter what you're writing about. If you use CER when you want to convince someone, claim, evidence, reasoning, or example, then you can make a really good paragraph, whether you work in business, whether you're writing for tourism, or whether you are writing for school, to get really good body paragraphs. So even if you're using tourism, right, you should visit Olympic National Park. That's a claim because it has the most beautiful natural beaches in America. There's my claim, convincing my reader to come to Olympic National Park. According to the National Park Service, The Olympic National Park has 78 miles of protected beaches, which is more than any other US state. Boom, with my citation. Then I use my reasoning. In other words, the Olympic National Park is the best place to see natural beaches. Good. Then I keep convincing my reader, if you come visit the park, then you have a chance to see beautiful beaches without large resorts or crowds of people, convincing them why this beach is awesome. And then I end my paragraph. So you should definitely come visit on your next trip to America. So even if you're writing about tourism, you still use this same thing to make really awesome writing. So to finish off, if you guys use your outline your persuasive paragraphs and use claim evidence reasoning, then your writing will be much easier. You will get much better grades, and you will be a great writer in your career, even if your grammar isn't perfect. So that's all for writing paragraphs. Good luck on your guys' assignments. Use and practice this every time you guys write, and you guys will be doing great. So if there's nothing else, guys, I will see ya. Good luck on your assignments.